Thank all of you, Larry and Lori. We want to thank you again for being the host that you have been, and Sam and Eric, and of course Tom and his lovely wife are really good guests at supper time, really good company come supper time, and so it's good to be here to speak to you the way we have been. And certainly we hope that there's something that we take away from here tonight that will be helpful to you. There are things that, in fact, you need to get your iPhones out. We're going to use your iPhones here in just a minute. Of course, before we get started, I want to give glory to God for anything that might advance the kingdom here tonight. Certainly you take something away with you from here to plant somewhere else. I think I heard all of them have said that this whole thing is about relationship. And there are certain things, as all of them have touched upon, that are geared toward destroying relationships. And so tonight we want to give you some tools, yes, from Scripture and yes, from your common experiences, to help you combat the wiles of the devil in this present age. And you must understand that this is a spiritual warfare that we are in, and we are called upon to occupy until he comes. Believe it or not, that is a military term, occupation. We are called upon to occupy, which means that he has already taken the land for you. He has already won the battle for you, and he is now giving you dominion, which is the first gift that he gives to mankind. He said, let them have dominion. In other words, it is, as Larry said, it is yours. Now have dominion over it. Occupy. After Christ came, and he's gone now, and he will return again. I was talking to several here tonight about his return. And we are to occupy. There's ground that's slipping away from us, and we need to talk about it. So be sure to get your cell phones out. The true Uncle Toms, the true racists in this country, they're not in this room. And I've been called all kinds of names that you can imagine, and so have you. And the worst thing you can call somebody that's not, because racists don't care if you call them a racist. A racist doesn't mind being called a racist. But people who are not, it is truly something that turns their stomach. The thought police are out, my friends. And Dr. Alan Keyes said to me, a good friend of mine, he said to me some years ago, he said, Cleon, that's my name, just because you don't see a communist behind every tree, it doesn't mean they're not there. And in this present age, he was called an Uncle Tom too, and so was Dr. Thomas Sowell, who's in my film, Runaway Slave. Andrew Breitbart, was a dear friend of mine, was in my film. I even have Al Sharpton and people like Julian Bond in my film. Glenn Beck, my good friend, in my film. And the whole message is to help us understand that tyranny does exist, and there have been tools of tyranny that have been used as an experimental method on a group of people for nearly 60 years, black folks. There have been social engineers who have tried out exactly what's happening to the rest of America on a group of people, a demographic for 60 years, to see if you can make a group of people codependent upon government, to see if you can run the man out of the household. They used people who look like us to deceive us. They used the black preacher in order to get the black vote. Because, Tom, you know this. I've pastored 3 churches full time over the last 40 years, from California all the way to Florida. Been on staffs in between in all types of places from coast to coast, border to border. Jane and I have done missionary work. My wife, my departed wife, God rest her soul. We travel the globe as well. South America, the Middle East. And let me tell you something. Friends, this is a time now where we must understand that there are wolves within the sheepfold. And these pastors, call them out for what they are. These hustlers of the gospel of Jesus Christ have been used historically to enslave a group of people to a political ideology. And they use that method over a period of time. The Al Sharptons of the world, the Jesse Jacksons of the world, they were chieftains, tribal chiefs. That's how most parishioners look at their pastor. He's the chief in the black community. And if pastor says we're going to vote for so-and-so, well then let's vote for so-and-so. And they were able to manipulate and use them in that way. And now you're seeing the seeds, the fruit of their labor, coming up now, not in the black community. That harvest has already been reaped. It's now coming up in your community, not necessarily in you, but it's coming up in your children. And they're using the same methods that they used on black people in order to do it. They're using people who look like you to do it. Do you realize that it is white liberals who push BLM? Antifa, Black Lives Matter is a product of white liberalism. And your white children are being led astray by people who look like them, even though they painted black. That's the diabolical nature of what we are seeing in this world today, in this country, in our nation today. 1619 Project is a lie on its face. The numbers are against it. America hasn't been around for 400 years. America hadn't been a nation but for 245 years, 46 years going on. But yet they want to feed your children the lie that slavery existed in this country, has existed in this country for 400 years. The common sense that all of you should know and be ready to spout is that no, slavery only existed in America for 86 years. Once America became a nation, we declared our independence from Britain and then won that war and then ratified our own Constitution. 86 years later, slavery was abolished in this country. No, it only existed for 86 years in the country of America. We were not a country in 1619. But your children are being fed and led astray by people who look like them. The real Uncle Toms are those who are wanting little black kids to think that somehow they are less than because of their slave history in this country. That's who the real Uncle Toms are. The real racists are the ones who fund those Uncle Toms, who are white, rich liberals. You're Hillary Clinton. There's nobody more racist than Hillary Clinton. Ask Donna Brazile. She'll tell you. Knew the Clintons back when they were governors, and I think Hillary was really the governor and probably the president of the United States already. But back in those days, and Even though I voted the first time. Seriously, I haven't been a Republican, but for the last 27, 28 years, I think the first time I did vote for Bill Clinton. I didn't vote for him. I think I voted for Bob Dole. Bob always said, gee whiz, I just can't win. But Matthew 4, if you just Google that on your iPhones, if you have your iPhones, Google that. Matthew 24. I want you to look at 3 and 4, verses 3 and 4. The question comes to Christ. And I touched upon this last night, and I want to explore this deeper in 2 portions of Scripture tonight. The disciples had asked him, when will be, what is the sign of your coming? And if you note there, if someone has verse 3, could you read that aloud for me, please? Verse 3, Matthew 24 and 3.
Yeah, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Stay right there. Keep standing for me. They ask him the question. And in case you didn't see it or hear me say it last night, I'll ask you to read the answer that he gave to them.
And Jesus answered them, see that no one leads you astray.
In the King James, that says, be certain. See to it. Beware that no one deceives you. Thank you. And my friends, as I said to you the other night, someone else find verse 10 in that same chapter. And if you would, you'd please stand and read verse 10 in that same chapter. Matthew 24 and 10. Yes.
And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another.
In the King James, it tells us that we shall turn on one another. For the first time in America, you have an administration in Washington, D.C. that is encouraging the people who know you to be conservatives, to be Christians, perhaps Republicans. They're telling them to be careful of you, because you may be left or right-wing radicalized. And so, for the first time in America, you are being encouraged to snitch on your fellow American. These are the seeds of tyranny that are being firmly and closely planted, that have been deeply rooted now for at least a generation, perhaps 2, into the soil of our American youth. And my friends, this morning Sam was talking about men who need to stand up with their daughters. I have 3 daughters of my own. We raised our granddaughter, Brittany. We had to raise one of our 4 children's daughters, their first child. She and her husband were not capable of taking care of any child. So we raised our youngest granddaughter, who's like a daughter to me. I've raised 4 daughters. I have 1 son. And he was the baby. And little does he know, I have saved his life on many occasions. But my girls, I would take them from the time that they were able to walk just about, my oldest one, Miranda. I'd take them on dates with me, and I treat them like ladies and show them how ladies should be treated from the time that they were young. My oldest now is in her 40s. But men, I thank God for this, and I'm certainly not bragging on anything that I do, because I am what I am by the grace of God, and that's it. But I thank God that each one of them girls, come Thanksgiving, regardless of what Daddy's living, finally living on the beach now, and I certainly look forward to seeing them this Thanksgiving. But you need to be the kind of man that your grown daughter, with her husband sitting there, will come and sit in your lap and lay her head on your shoulders. Men, we have forsaken our daughters. My daughters know that they can call me right now. I will drop this mic, and I will be there. Men, we have forsaken our daughters. There is no fight. There is no anything that can come against those girls that I would not try and rectify. My son, on the other hand, I've taught him to be his own man and to love his daughters, to love his son, and to train them in the way that they should go. Men, let me say this to you, and I'm going to come in heavy on you here in just a couple of moments, so buckle your seatbelts. The time was in the nuclear family that has been by design destroyed. In the black neighborhood, it's been destroyed by the Uncle Toms that I'm talking about, like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson. With all the beer signs and all of the advertisement in black communities about Schlitz malt liquor bull and all that kind of thing, Jesse Jackson never said a word about that. But yet, Budweiser gave him his own distributorship there in Chicago. I wonder why he didn't say nothing about the beer signs in the black neighborhood. That's your Uncle Tom. The true racists are those who will pay him to be who he is. And that's your corporate America in most cases, who have paid them extortion money over the years. And so has our government. They have your money in their pockets as well. And so it was a time when what you learned at your house, you learned at school. And then on Sunday, the family went to church. And what you learned at the house and what you learned at school, you heard from your preacher. The message, even though all of us were different denominations, but there was a certain thing that all of us could agree on. We were not all conformed with one another, but we were in unity with one another about what the family was. We were in unity regardless of what your denomination was. We were in unity about what gender was. But now they're wanting to define our American cohesiveness, e pluribus unum, as unity in a liberal way, but it's not. It's conformity. And there's a difference between the two now. Don't get them twisted. Conformity means that we all go goose step and walk the same way. We all going to Heil Hitler the same way. We're all conformed to that, and that's exactly what this cancel culture and critical race theory is trying to program into the hearts and minds of a free people. Is you need to conform, or you find yourself on the outs. And in this world where everybody wants to be liked, well, you got to conform in order to continue getting your likes. Kids are killing themselves because they were unliked. You better hear me. Kids are so wrapped up in what we used to call peer pressure, it's turned into a 4-letter word. Liked. Our children live in the most prosperous nation on the face of the planet, but yet they don't want to live. You know how high the suicide rate is among our children? They're the most prosperous on earth, but they don't want to live. Are you kidding me? I don't really want to be 18 again, but hey, I don't think they got a bad deal compared to when I was 18. You guys remember what it was. There are 18-year-old kids now making $15 an hour. I think minimum wage for me was $2.25 or something like that. Maybe less. I used to bust suds for my dad. I was he and granddad's slave for a long time. Hope they're proud of me, though. I was taught by that man to think for myself. And that's what they take from you the first time. At first, they must now control your thinking. They must call the shots on how you're going to think it and how you're going to talk about it. My father instilled in me something from the very beginning. Walking in a field, our field down, I still own 64 acres of that Grand Cane property that they worked for. Was 300 at one time, but various parts of the family sold off their part. But my grandparents always told me, don't sell the land. Hold on to that land. Don't sell it. There's money in that land. Lo and behold, they're right in the middle of the Haynesville Shale, one of the largest gas deposits found in America. Don't sell. Grandma told me that on her deathbed. I promised her I'd never do it. And I didn't. Don't sell this land. The others sold theirs. But let me tell you this. Think for yourself, Daddy walking around on that property with me. Sun on your face. The first lesson he taught me about thinking for myself was this. He said, son, how much would you pay for that sun on your face? That's a man didn't have a third grade education. But he was a very wise man, the wisest man I ever knew. How much do you pay? How much would you pay? How much could you pay for that? And of course, there was no answer. I didn't know what to say. Is sun shining on your face? Dad, what are you talking about? There are some things you need to think about that are priceless, and the thing that is the most priceless, the thing that is most precious to all of us, is that thing that can go away. And that's this American freedom. I said to you last night, if America goes away, where do people go? How much is it worth? How much is she worth? Oh, you ask them who are risking their lives coming across a desert place to get here. Doesn't take a village to raise a child. It takes parents. Oh, Hillary Clinton has tried to sell that lie. It takes a village to raise. No, it doesn't. It takes parents. Because, see, there are people in the village today that you don't want anywhere near your child. The village has changed. It takes parents to raise a child. Now, critical race theory. Tom said earlier today, he pointed out to us that it is an act of criticizing in academia. It's an act of criticizing the foundation of who we are. Which means that we're rotten at the core is what they're wanting you to tell you. But the founders, as I said to you, the founders knew that we were not perfect from the very beginning. They infused in the very preamble of our Constitution. Why are we forming this nation? In order to form a more perfect union. And just 86 years later, they took the greatest step of removing the blight that was on this country in its founding, and that was the enslavement of human beings. The Republican Party was founded to stop the spread of slavery in this country. But you don't tell that story. Christianity, Christ came to set the captives free. And America is an offshoot. It is an image of the invisible God. It is an image of what God would have for men, a place where they can be free so that the kingdom of God can be reflected upon the earth in a Judeo-Christian society. If she goes away, if God goes away, if God's representative on this earth goes away, where do people go? Each one of us have talked about how it is evaporating, how our people of faith are under attack in this country. Each one of us have talked about that. The same gentleman I was telling you about last night who came to me and said, CL, if USA goes away, where do people go? He asked this question, or he made this statement. He said, CL, I see something on the faces of the children. He's a very poetic kind of guy. I like this. You'll like this. He said, of the children of those brave men who stormed the beaches of Normandy. He's talking about us. We're their descendants. We're their children. He said, I see something on y'all's faces, he didn't say y'all, on your faces, that I've never seen on American faces before. I said, yeah, what's that? He said, fear. He said, he was just talking about how the world views us. He says the world is not used to seeing America or Americans becoming Americans. And you've seen it transform in the last 7 months. Doesn't take long. Reagan may have been wrong about it. It'll just take only no, it may just take 7, 8 months, may take a year to tear down what has been built up in the faces of the children of those brave men, those warriors, who had the courage to storm the beaches of Normandy to set people free, to free the world of fascism. Have you ever watched Private Ryan, Saving Private Ryan? Have you ever seen the opening sequence of that? We are the children of those men who were brave enough to do that. Not just to free us or keep us from free to fight the war over there, but to storm that beach. We are their children, and our allies are saying to us they're seeing something in our faces. Not the American strut, not the American swagger. They are seeing fear in the face of Americans. Why are they seeing fear? I'm going to blame some of you, men in particular in this room, especially you Caucasian guys. I never have known you to be sheepish in my life. I've never known you to be sheepish. Not even when my ancestors were in chains, they didn't know you to be sheepish. When the Irish came here, when the Italian came here, when the Scandinavian came here, they didn't know the American male to be sheepish. They took sight of his ingenuity and the example. Even if you were in chains, you wanted to be free like him because he was bold enough to ford the rivers. He was bold enough to talk about manifest destiny. He was bold enough to believe that the God that had given him dominion over this earth could surely help him subdue a nation like this from sea to shining sea. And if we could speak to Dr. Franklin, who answered Elizabeth Powell's question the day that he came out of the Constitutional Convention, Dr. Franklin, what type of government have you gotten for us? He said, I've gotten for you a republic, if you can keep it. We'd like to say to him from this place in Birmingham, down through the annals of time, Dr. Franklin, we have kept it. We are holding it. And we'd like to say as Christians to Christ, we are occupying what you have given to us. But you, my fellow Americans, are being sheepish, and you're falling for the hoax that they play upon you, that black people are being hunted down by police officers. Black men are being hunted down. Let me tell you mathematically why that's absolutely inaccurate. I told you I'd give you some things to take with you. A lot of you may not know this. Let's break it down mathematically. Black people represent 12.8%. You get it? 12.8% of every man that's black, of every woman that's black, of every child that is black, boy or girl. Black folks represent 12.8% of the population. Now, statistically, women do outnumber men, right? Which means that black women are a little bit more than 7.7% of that population. And men fall somewhere around 5 to 4.8% of the American population. Black men. Black men, talking about boys, girls as well. Boys, rather. Black men represent about 4.7 to 4.8 of the American population. Now, out of that 4.8%, let's say 4.5. Out of that 4.5%, 3.5% of that population, black men I'm talking about, do very well in this country. They make up the black middle class. They're your black doctors. They make money. They live in Miami and other nice places around the country. You don't see them in the inner cities. They are the people that, I won't call his name, did on the television show, who was America's dad. That's a true, that story is true all over America. But you don't see that. I'm that. I'm not him, but I'm that. Okay? I'm successful in this country. And yes, my father did very well, but let me tell you something about inheritance. You have to work to keep it. I know a lot of wealthy friends of mine who are not wealthy anymore because their fathers, their mothers worked and left them stuff that they squandered. No, you have to work to keep it because somebody, I don't care who you are, somebody's always going to try to take it away from you. But black men who are trifling are the same percentage of white men who are. The same percentage of Mexicans who are. That's 1% of just about any population. And you outnumber us, obviously, exponentially. But somehow they have planted in your mind that black folks are everywhere. 12% of the population can't be everywhere. And certainly, if they wanted to exterminate that 1% that gives us all troubles in any one of the demographics, if black men, if black criminals or whatever were truly being hunted, believe me, friends, that would not be difficult to do. But they got you hoodwinked. They have swindled you through the idea that somehow if you don't think that way, you're a racist. And you are sheepish enough to back off and accept it. Turn to Genesis 19. Google that on your phones. Genesis 19. And someone, you have a King James version of the Bible? Anyone can Google it on Bible Hub, King James Version, Genesis 19. I like the way the King James puts this. The New New International Version, I don't think give it justice as far as its meaning is concerned. Genesis 19, verse 4. Who has it? Verse 4. Verse 4. Genesis 19 and verse 4. Hear this.
The Bible says, but before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter.
Everybody had encompassed Lot's house. He was being visited by the angels of God. Now hear me, men. Hear me, y'all. Don't leave me now. I want to show you something. The scripture says that those who came to molest Lot's visitors came from every quarter. First, it says that the men showed up. Then the young men showed up. Then it says in the King James that people came from every quarter. Do you know who was not there? The police. You know why they were not there? Because it had become a part of the culture. And so the law enforcement that would break up the disturbance at this man's house did not even show up. In fact, they were probably a part of the crowd. The culture had been corrupted. And everybody thought it was good to want to molest this man's guest. And don't you dare think that you are far from this type of problem while these men stand around directing the chaos. And that's what you're seeing in this country. You see men standing around, especially the white male. You are allowing yourself to be kicked around. You sheep, I just cannot believe this. You're allowing yourself to be derided. You are doing exactly what we tried to avoid. You are letting yourselves be sucked down a rabbit hole that they put us in when we escaped slavery, when the civil rights was passed. We were trying to be seen as men, not as colors. But you are standing around and allowing yourselves to be judged by the color of your skin. You should wake up. Because the trouble of the world, no, it's not a white man's problem. What's going on in Chicago with babies, black babies being shot. We talk about individual responsibility. Daddy teaching me to think for myself. Think about this. And you tell your black friends, your black whoever it is you might know, you be sure to carry this and let them know that that problem in Chicago with those black babies being killed, that is a black man's problem if you live in that neighborhood. That's not anything the government should solve. That's something some black daddy should take into his own hand with other black daddies and say, hey, enough is enough. And American men, red, yellow, black, or white, whoever you may be, American men, that's exactly what we should say to those who are trying to advance the theories of Marxism in this country. We should take a stand and say to the school boards that we will not tolerate this in our country. The troubles of the world, the problems, and men, you're not going to like this, but I want you to think about it. Every problem in the world, when you break it down to the common denominator, going all the way back to Father Adam. And I do believe it is Father Adam that we all, and Mother Eve, who we all came from. I do believe that. I think that's a science. If we want to trust the science, science will even back that up. But I think that we can trace the difficulties, the problems of our world, men, I being a card carrier myself. You can trace the problems of the world to some man who did not shoulder his responsibility. Adam did not shoulder his responsibility in that garden. And probably we don't shoulder a lot of the responsibility that we ought to for the very same reason. There are roles, distinct roles. And women, don't chase me out of here. Stay with me. That God has placed a partnership with in this earth realm so that we produce good citizens, strong societies. I'm not saying that any woman should be subservient to a man. No, my wife never was. And she always knew, and I certainly believe she knows now, that she was always the boss. But men, when you abandon your responsibility, you leave vulnerable then. You leave vulnerable then your children to whatever wind may blow across your society's landscape. I will leave you with this. Adam, where are you? God comes walking in the cool of evening with his crowning glory. Mankind, Adam. But on this particular occasion, somehow God, of course, knew the location of Adam, but he did not see Adam. Adam, where are you? What was God asking him? Well, he was probably asking him the same type of question that our founders would ask us if they would come back and see the America that we have right now. They would ask America, where are you? Where is the nation that we intended to find and found? America, where are you? Men of America. Adam, where are you? The core values, the principles that have made this nation the greatest nation on the face of the planet. Where are they? Where is your foundation? And why are you allowing it to be destroyed? A nation that God has blessed from sea to shining sea. 1619 Project, that's the story they would want you to tell. The thing that I didn't tell you about that room of the past, and I'll take my seat, is this. You can walk into that room of the past. You can see the mirrors on the wall. You can see the pictures on the wall. And you can even experience the memories of being in that room of the past. But friends and neighbors, my fellow Americans, there's not one picture. There's not one mirror. There's not one stick of furniture in that room of the past. There's not one memory that you can possibly change in that room of the past. So yes, Larry, it is time to move on. It is time to move forward. This is where we are, America. The Macmillans were a neighboring family of our farm down in Grand Cane, Louisiana. Grand Cane is about 7 miles north of Mansfield, Louisiana, where one of the very last battles of the Civil War, the Battle of Mansfield, was fought there in Mansfield, Louisiana, 7 miles south of our farm. And every year they reenact the Battle of Mansfield. And of course, the Southerners, we call it the rematch. Thinking maybe the outcome will be different this time. But at the Battle of Mansfield, we also had people who were Confederate valets who were in the Macmillan family, and of course in the Salters, my mother's family as well. And so the story goes that Grandpa's mule, Jack, came up shot, dead in the field. Grandpa swore that it was one of them Macmillans that had to do it. Never got a chance to prove that. He never proved that. But to his dying day, Grandpa fed into the head of every one of his children that those doggone Macmillans made that winter hard for us because old Jack was dead and I couldn't get in the crops the way I normally would. He planted in the minds of my aunts, my daddy. We'd go to funerals. Somebody died in the community, and the Salters and the Bryants and them would sit on one side. Macmillans would sit on the other side. So as I began to grow up and visit my grandparents down in the summertime, down on the farm, Macmillans had some pretty good-looking girls in that family. And I gained an interest in one of them, and I started talking to her, and my grandmother got wind of it. She pulled me aside and she said, "Don't you ever let me catch you talking to no Macmillan, ever." I didn't know what that was about. I asked my girl cousins, "What's that about?" She says, "Oh, I think it's something about some mule." What they were doing was teaching us to carry forward a grudge from the past. A grudge that none of us knew anything about. We didn't know Jack. We didn't know the mule. We didn't know Grandpa that well because he died not long after we were little. We didn't know him, but we were carrying on a grudge that Grandpa had passed down to his children. And Grandma saw it fit to make sure it passed down to us. And Americans, that's what we're seeing in this country right now. You're seeing a grudge being passed down from generation to generation. Let's break that spell now. And so, my fellow Americans, I am glad to stand with you in any fight that we can fight. I encourage you to get my book. It's endorsed by my good friend, Sean Hannity. In fact, I was on with Sean on Sean's radio show just on Thursday afternoon. I was on with Sean. Very dear friend of mine. He's endorsed my book. Alan West has endorsed that book. My pastor, James McManus, and the president of Freedom Works, Adam Brandon, has endorsed my book as well. I encourage you to give it to younger people, to young people. I encourage you to get, as I heard Eric say the other day, get 2 or 3 copies, get 3 or 4 copies, and and help advance the kingdom of God. May God bless and keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and give you peace.